The morning sun felt cold against Clara May's face as she stood on the courthouse steps. Her small hands gripped a cracked photograph so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The picture showed a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. This was all she had left of her mama. 8 years old and alone in the world. That's what the papers said about her. 8 years old with nowhere to go and no one to care. Her papa had died just 3 weeks ago, coughing blood until there was nothing left of him but memories. The consumption had taken him quick, leaving Clara May with nothing but questions and that precious photograph. The courthouse square buzzed with activity. Men in worn work clothes and women in simple dresses gathered around, talking in hushed voices. Children of all ages stood in a line along the courthouse steps. Some cried softly. Others stared ahead with empty eyes. A few tried to look brave, but Clara May could see the fear in their faces. She recognized that fear because it lived in her chest too, growing bigger with each passing minute. This was auction day, the day when children without families got sold to families who needed extra hands. The grown-ups called it adoption, but Clara May knew better. She had heard the whispers in town. She had seen how other orphaned children lived with their new families. They worked from sunrise to sunset. They slept in barns. They ate scraps. They got beaten when they made mistakes, just like Mama had been sold all those years ago. Clara May closed her eyes and remembered her Mama's voice. Soft and sweet, telling stories late at night when Papa was out working. Mama had been born into slavery down south. She never talked much about those days, but sometimes, when she thought Clara May was sleeping, she would cry. Silent tears that fell like rain on her pillow. "They sold me when I was just a little girl," Mama had whispered one night. "Took me from my own mama and sold me like I was nothing more than a cow or a horse. But you, my sweet Clara May, you're worth more than any price they could ever pay." Now here Clara May stood, about to be sold just like her mama had been. Different time, different place, but the same feeling of being treated like property instead of a person. The auctioneer stepped forward. He was a large man with a booming voice and cold eyes. In his hand he held a list with all their names. Clara May's name was written at the bottom in black ink. She would be the last one sold today. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the square, "we have some fine children here today. Strong backs, willing hearts, and eager to please. These youngsters need good Christian homes, and I'm sure there are plenty of good Christian folks here who could use some help around their farms and businesses." Clara May's stomach twisted. The way he talked made her feel sick, like she was a piece of furniture being sold at a store. The first child called forward was a boy named Billy. He couldn't have been more than 6 years old. His clothes were too big for his tiny frame, and his shoes had holes in them. Billy walked to the front of the steps with his head down, not looking at any of the people in the crowd. "Now this here is a good boy," the auctioneer said, putting his hand on Billy's shoulder. "Lost his folks to the fever last month. He's young, but he's got good hands for farm work. Knows how to milk cows and feed chickens. Starting bid is $5. Hands shot up in the crowd. Men called out numbers. $10, 15, 20. Billy stood there like a statue while people decided his fate with dollar signs and pointing fingers. A rough-looking man with tobacco stains on his shirt won the bid at $25. Clara May watched as Billy walked over to his new owner. The man looked Billy up and down like he was inspecting a horse he'd just bought. Billy's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't make a sound. Next came a girl named Rosie, then 2 brothers called Jim and John. One by one, children walked to the front of the steps. One by one, they got sold to the highest bidder. Clara May noticed that none of the buyers looked particularly kind. They all had the same expression, calculating, cold, focused on what kind of work they could get out of their purchase. As each child got sold, Clara May's heart beat faster. She thought about running away, but where would she go? She had no money, no food, and winter was coming soon. A little girl couldn't survive on her own in the wilderness. She looked down at her mama's photograph again. In the picture, Mama wore a simple dress and had flowers in her hair. She looked happy, but Clara May knew this picture was taken after Mama had gained her freedom, after she had met Papa and started a new life. Before that, Mama had lived through things that Clara May couldn't even imagine. "Mama," Clara May whispered to the photograph, "I'm scared." The wind picked up, blowing dust across the courthouse square. Clara May shivered, but not from the cold. She shivered from fear of what was coming next. Finally, there were only 3 children left. A teenage boy named Peter got sold to a blacksmith for $30. A girl named Nancy went to a family that ran a boarding house for $40. Then it was just Clara May standing alone on the courthouse steps. And finally, the auctioneer announced, his voice echoing off the courthouse walls, "We have this little miss, Clara May Johnson. 8 years old, recently orphaned. She's small but sturdy, good for household work, sewing, cooking, and general farm chores. She can read and write, which makes her extra valuable." Clara May felt like throwing up. The way he described her made her feel like a thing instead of a person. She wasn't valuable because she was smart or kind or had feelings. She was valuable because she could work. The crowd looked her over. Men whispered to their wives. Women shook their heads or nodded in approval. Clara May felt their eyes examining her like she was livestock at a market. "Let's start the bidding at $10, the auctioneer called out. A hand went up, then another. The price climbed quickly. $15, $20, $25. The bidding war was between 3 men. One owned a large farm outside of town. Another ran a general store. The third looked like he had never smiled a day in his life. Clara May watched these men decide her future with dollar bills and hand gestures. None of them had even spoken to her. None of them had asked her name or how she was feeling or what she liked to do. To them, she was just another mouth to feed and another pair of hands to put to work. The farm owner bid $35. The store owner shook his head and walked away. Now it was just between the farmer and the mean-looking man. They went back and forth, raising the price by $1 each time. 36, 37, 38. Clara May closed her eyes and tried to remember her mama's voice. "You're worth more than any price they'll pay," Mama had said. But standing here on these courthouse steps, watching grown men bid on her like she was a piece of property, Clara May didn't feel worth much at all. The mean-looking man bid $40. The farmer hesitated. $40 was a lot of money for most folks in their small town. Clara May held her breath, praying that someone else would bid. Anyone but the mean-looking man who stared at her with hungry eyes. $40, the auctioneer called out. "Do I hear 41? Silence filled the courthouse square. The farmer shook his head and stepped back. It looked like the mean-looking man had won. Clara May's heart sank into her stomach. She could already imagine what life would be like with him. Hard work, harsh words, and probably worse things that she didn't want to think about. "Going once," the auctioneer announced. Clara May squeezed her mama's photograph tighter. "Going twice." She closed her eyes and whispered the only prayer she knew. "Please, God, please help me." "Sold to $50. The voice came from the back of the crowd. Deep and calm, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Clara May opened her eyes and turned to look. She couldn't see who had spoken because too many people stood in the way. The crowd murmured and shifted. People turned to see who had made such a high bid. Even the auctioneer looked surprised. $50 was more money than most people in their town saw in months. "Did someone say $50? The auctioneer asked, shading his eyes with his hand as he peered into the crowd. "I did." The crowd parted like water, and a man walked forward. He was tall and lean with graying hair and kind eyes. His clothes were simple but clean. Work boots, dark pants, and a worn jacket. He walked with the quiet confidence of someone used to wide open spaces and hard work. The mean-looking man who had been winning the auction stepped forward. "Now hold on there, stranger. I was just about to buy this girl fair and square." The newcomer looked at the mean-looking man without flinching. "The auction isn't over until the auctioneer says sold." "I bid $50. $55, the mean-looking man shot back, anger flashing in his eyes. "60, the newcomer said calmly. The mean-looking man's face turned red. He looked at the newcomer, then at Clara May, then at his wallet. After a long moment, he shook his head and walked away, muttering under his breath. $60 going once, the auctioneer called out, looking around to see if anyone else wanted to bid. Going twice. Sold to the gentleman for $60. Clara May stared at the man who had just bought her. He looked different from the other bidders. His eyes weren't cold or calculating. They were sad, like he understood something about loss and loneliness, but that didn't change the fact that he had just purchased her like a piece of property. As the man walked toward the courthouse steps, too. The man who had bought Clara May walked up the courthouse steps with slow, steady movements. Each step echoed in the suddenly quiet square. Clara May stood frozen. still gripping her mama's photograph, watching this stranger who now owned her approach. Up close, she could see more details about him. His face was weathered like old leather, marked by years of sun and wind. Deep lines creased the corners of his eyes, but they weren't angry lines. They looked like the kind of lines that came from squinting at distant horizons and smiling at sunsets. His hands were rough and calloused from hard work, but when he reached into his jacket pocket to pull out his wallet, his movements were gentle. $60, he said quietly to the auctioneer, counting out the money in worn bills. His voice carried a slight accent that Clara May couldn't quite place. Not from around here, that was for sure. The auctioneer counted the money twice, then nodded. "She's all yours, mister." "Mackenzie," the man said. "Thomas Mackenzie. Well, Mr. Mackenzie, you just bought yourself a fine worker. This girl's got good breeding. Her daddy was a carpenter before he took sick, and her mama could sew better than anyone in 3 counties. She'll serve you well." Thomas Mackenzie looked at the auctioneer with something cold flickering in his kind eyes. "She's not a horse, sir. She's a child." The auctioneer laughed uncomfortably and shrugged. "Child worker, same difference when you're running a business. Papers are in the courthouse office. You can collect them any time." Clara May watched this exchange with growing confusion. Most men who bought children at these auctions seemed excited about their purchase, already talking about the work they'd get done and the money they'd save on hired help. But Thomas Mackenzie looked almost sad, like buying her had been painful instead of profitable. As the crowd began to disperse and the other children left with their new owners, Thomas Mackenzie turned to Clara May. He didn't tower over her or try to grab her arm like she had expected. Instead, he crouched down so they were eye to eye. "Hello, Clara May," he said softly. "My name is Tom. I know you're scared right now, and I don't blame you one bit. This whole business is frightening for anyone, especially someone as young as you." Clara May stared at him without speaking. She had learned not to trust grown-ups who spoke kindly. In her experience, the nicer they sounded, the meaner they turned out to be later. Tom seemed to understand her silence. He nodded slowly and stood back up. "I have a wagon over there," he said, pointing to a sturdy wooden wagon hitched to 2 horses. "It's a long ride to where we're going. You hungry?" Clara May's stomach had been empty since yesterday, but she shook her head. She didn't want to owe this man anything, not even a piece of bread. "Well, I'm hungry," Tom said easily. "Mind if we stop by the general store before we head out? I could use some supplies for the road." Without waiting for her answer, he started walking toward his wagon. Clara May hesitated for a moment, then followed. What choice did she have? He owned her now, fair and square. The wagon was bigger than it had looked from far away. The wooden sides were worn smooth by weather and use, and the seat was covered with a soft blanket. Tom's 2 horses were beautiful animals, brown and black with intelligent eyes and clean coats. They looked well cared for, which Clara May noted with surprise. Mean people usually treated their animals badly. Tom helped Clara May up onto the wagon seat, his touch brief and respectful. Then he climbed up beside her and took the reins. "These are Daisy and Duke," he said, nodding toward the horses. "They've been with me for 5 years now. Good, steady animals. They'll get us home safe." Home? The word made Clara May's chest tighten. She had no home anymore. The little house where she'd lived with Mama and Papa had been sold to pay Papa's doctor bills. Everything she had ever known was gone. They rode through town in comfortable silence. Clara May noticed that Tom didn't try to fill the quiet with meaningless chatter like some grown-ups did. He seemed content to let her think her own thoughts while he guided the horses through the muddy streets. At the general store, Tom bought supplies that surprised Clara May. Instead of just basic food and travel necessities, he purchased things that seemed specifically chosen for her. A warm coat in her size, a pair of sturdy shoes, a wool blanket, even a small bag of peppermint candy. "Winter comes early where we're heading," he explained as he loaded the supplies into the wagon. "Want to make sure you stay warm." Clara May watched him work, trying to figure out his angle. In her 8 years of life, she had learned that grown-ups always had angles. They were nice when they wanted something, mean when they didn't get it, and fake when they were trying to impress other grown-ups. But Tom Mackenzie didn't seem to fit any of those patterns. As they left town and headed west, the landscape began to change. The familiar hills and farms of Missouri gave way to wider spaces and bigger skies. Clara May had never been this far from home before. Every mile took her further from everything she had ever known. You ever been out west? Tom asked after they'd been riding for about an hour. Clara May shook her head. It's different out there, Tom continued, his eyes fixed on the horizon. More space, more freedom. A person can start over out west, become whoever they want to be. Is that what you did? Clara May found herself asking, then immediately regretted speaking. She didn't want to encourage conversation. Tom smiled slightly. In a way, yes. I came out to Wyoming territory about 10 years ago. Had some things I needed to leave behind. What kind of things? Tom was quiet for a long moment. Clara May thought he wasn't going to answer, and she almost felt relieved. She didn't really want to know about his past. The less she knew about him, the easier it would be to keep her distance. But then Tom spoke, his voice so soft she had to strain to hear it over the wagon wheels and horse hooves. I lost my family back east. My wife and daughter. Fever took them both in the same week. After that, I couldn't stay in the same place where we'd been happy together. Too many memories, you know? So I packed up what I could carry and headed west. Clara May felt something shift in her chest. She understood about losing family. She understood about memories that hurt too much to face. Maybe Tom Mackenzie wasn't quite the stranger she had thought he was. How old was she? Clara May asked. Your daughter? 8, Tom said quietly. Same as you. They rode in silence after that, but it felt different now. Less like a stranger taking her away to an unknown fate, and more like two people who understood something important about loss and loneliness. As the sun began to set, Tom pulled the wagon off the main road and made camp near a small stream. He was efficient and practiced at setting up for the night, clearly someone who had spent plenty of time sleeping under the stars. He built a small fire, cooked beans and bacon in a cast-iron pot, and made coffee in a battered tin cup. You sure you're not hungry? He asked, holding out a plate of food. This time Clara May nodded and accepted the meal. She was too hungry to keep pretending she didn't need anything. The food was simple but good, seasoned with salt and cooked over open flame. It tasted like adventure and possibility, two things that had been missing from her life for a very long time. After they ate, Tom spread blankets on the ground near the fire. He gave Clara May the warmest one and made sure she was comfortable before settling down on the other side of the fire. Mr. Mackenzie? Clara May said into the darkness. Just Tom is fine. Tom, what's going to happen to me? Tom was quiet for so long that Clara May thought he had fallen asleep. But then his voice came across the dying fire, gentle and honest. I don't rightly know, Clara May. I didn't plan any of this. I came to town today to buy supplies, not to buy a child. But when I saw you standing on those courthouse steps looking so scared and alone, well, it reminded me of someone I used to know, someone who deserved better than what she got. Your daughter, my daughter, and maybe you too. Clara May pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Are you going to make me work in your fields? Clean your house? Take care of your animals? A ranch needs a lot of hands, Tom said carefully. But I'm not looking for a slave, if that's what you're asking. I'm looking for, well, I'm not sure exactly what I'm looking for, but I know it's not someone to boss around and work to death. Then why did you buy me? Tom stirred the fire with a long stick, sending sparks up into the star-filled sky. Maybe because you needed buying. Maybe because I needed someone to look after. Maybe because sometimes the right thing to do isn't the logical thing to do. Clara May considered this as she listened to the night sounds around them. Crickets chirping, horses shifting in their sleep, wind rustling through grass. It was peaceful in a way she hadn't expected. I had a mama once, she said suddenly. She was sold too, just like me. I figured as much, Tom said gently. Want to tell me about her? And surprisingly, Clara May did want to tell him. For the first time since Mama died, she wanted to share those precious memories with someone who might understand. She was beautiful, Clara May began, her voice growing stronger with each word. And she was brave. She used to tell me stories about being strong, about surviving things that seemed impossible. She said I was worth more than any price anyone could ever pay. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. But they sold her anyway. And now they sold me too. The Mackenzie Ranch appeared on the horizon like something from a dream. After 3 days of traveling through increasingly wild country, Clara May had grown used to seeing nothing but endless grassland and distant mountains. But suddenly there it was, a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley with a clear stream running through it. The main house was bigger than any place Clara May had ever lived. 2 stories tall with a wide front porch, painted white with green shutters. Beside it stood a large red barn, a chicken coop, several smaller buildings, and corrals filled with horses and cattle. Smoke curled up from the chimney and yellow light glowed warmly in the windows. "Welcome to the Double M Ranch," Tom said as their wagon rolled up the dirt road toward the house. "Been my home for the past 8 years." Clara May stared at everything with wide eyes. She had expected a small cabin or maybe a rundown farmhouse. This looked like the kind of place where rich people lived, not a working ranch where she would be just another hired hand. Before they reached the house, the front door opened and a woman stepped out onto the porch. She was middle-aged with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her dress was simple but clean, and she wore an apron around her waist. When she saw the wagon approaching, she shaded her eyes with one hand and peered at them curiously. "That's Maria," Tom explained. "She keeps the house running and makes sure I don't starve to death. Been with me since I first came out here. Good woman. You'll like her." Clara May wasn't so sure about that. In her experience, housekeepers were often the meanest people in any household. They worked hard and expected everyone else to work just as hard. They had no patience for lazy children or foolish mistakes. Tom pulled the wagon to a stop near the front porch. Maria walked down the steps to meet them, her expression curious but not unfriendly. She looked at Clara May with dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. "Tom," she said in accented English, "you said you were going to town for supplies. You didn't mention bringing home a child." Tom climbed down from the wagon and helped Clara May down too. She stayed close to his side, uncertain and nervous. "Maria, I'd like you to meet Clara May. Clara May, this is Maria Gonzalez. She runs this place better than I ever could." Maria looked between Tom and Clara May, clearly trying to understand the situation. "And Clara May is my daughter," Tom said simply. The words hit Clara May like cold water. Daughter? She wasn't his daughter. She was his property. He had bought her at an auction for $60. Children who got purchased didn't become daughters. They became workers. Maria's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded as if men brought home new daughters every day. "I see. Well then, Clara May, welcome to your new home. Are you hungry? Tired? I imagine it was a long journey." Clara May didn't answer. She couldn't find her voice. Everything about this situation felt wrong and confusing. Why were they pretending she was family when everyone knew she was just a purchased child? "She's had a hard few days," Tom said gently. "Lost her parents recently. She might need some time to settle in." Maria's expression softened with understanding. "Of course. Come, child. Let me show you to your room. You can rest and clean up before dinner. Your room, not the servants' quarters or the barn loft, your room." Clara May followed Maria into the house, still clutching her mama's photograph, her mind spinning with confusion. The inside of the house was just as impressive as the outside. Clean wooden floors, comfortable furniture, rugs on the walls, and a stone fireplace big enough to stand in. Everything spoke of comfort and care, not the stark functionality she had expected from a ranch house. Maria led her up a staircase to the second floor. The hallway had several doors, all painted white with brass handles. Maria stopped at one door and opened it slowly. "This will be your room," she said softly. Clara May stepped inside and gasped. The room was beautiful. A real bed with a quilt coverlet, a wooden dresser, a chair by the window, and even a small bookshelf. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, making everything glow golden and warm. It was the nicest room Clara May had ever seen, let alone been told she could sleep in. But what made her heart stop were the personal touches. A child's doll sitting on the dresser, a small rocking horse in the corner, books that looked like they were meant for someone her age, and on the wall a painting of a little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. This was his daughter's room, Clara May whispered, understanding flooding through her. Maria nodded sadly. "Yes, little Anne. She would have been about your age now if she had lived. Tom has kept everything exactly as it was." Clara May looked around the room with new eyes. This wasn't just a bedroom. It was a shrine to a lost child. And now Tom expected her to live here, to sleep in a dead girl's bed, to play with a dead girl's toys. The thought made her feel sick and angry at the same time. "I can't stay here," Clara May said, backing toward the door. "This isn't my room. It belongs to someone else." "Clara May," Maria began gently. "No." Clara May's voice rose higher than she intended. "I won't pretend to be his dead daughter. I won't sleep in her bed and wear her clothes and play with her toys. I'm not her. With that, Clara May ran from the room, down the stairs and out the front door. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay in that house, in that room, pretending to be someone she wasn't. She ran past the barn and the corrals, past the chicken coop and the vegetable garden, until she reached the stream that ran through the property. There she collapsed on the bank and finally let herself cry all the tears she had been holding back for days. She cried for her mama and papa. She cried for the home she would never see again. She cried for the scared, lonely little girl she had become. And she cried because, for just a moment, she had started to hope that maybe Tom Mackenzie really was different from other grown-ups. But now she knew the truth. He didn't want her. He wanted his dead daughter back, and he thought he could use Clara May to fill that empty space in his heart. She was still crying when she heard footsteps behind her. Tom sat down on the stream bank beside her, not too close, but near enough that she knew he was there. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have thought about how that room would feel to you. I wasn't thinking clearly." Clara May wiped her nose on her sleeve and glared at him through her tears. "You want me to be her. Your daughter who died. That's why you bought me, isn't it? Because I'm the same age she was. Because I look a little bit like her." Tom was quiet for a long moment, staring at the water flowing over the rocks. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with sadness. "Maybe that's part of it," he admitted. "When I saw you on those courthouse steps, you did remind me of Anne. The way you stood so straight even though you were scared. The way you held that photograph like it was the most precious thing in the world. Anne used to hold her favorite doll like that. So I was right. You don't want me. You want her." Tom turned to look at Clara May directly. His eyes were sad but honest. "I want her more than anything in this world. I would give everything I own to have her back. But she's gone, and buying you won't bring her back. I know that. Then why did you buy me? Because you needed someone to care about you, and I needed someone to care about. Maybe that's not the best reason to start a family, but it's the only reason I've got." Clara May considered this. It wasn't the answer she had expected, but it felt more honest than pretty lies about love at first sight or instant family bonds. "I won't be her," Clara May said firmly. "I won't pretend to be someone I'm not just to make you feel better about losing her." "I wouldn't want you to," Tom replied. "Anne was Anne and you're you. Different people entirely." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water and the wind and the grass. Finally, Clara May spoke again. "Where will I sleep if not in her room?" "Wherever you want. There are other rooms in the house, or we could fix up a space in the barn if you'd prefer. Whatever makes you comfortable. And what will I do here? What kind of work?" Tom picked up a small stone and skipped it across the water. "Learn, I suppose. Learn to read better. Learn to write, learn about ranching if it interests you. Help Maria with cooking and cleaning if you want to. Take care of the animals. Lots of things need doing on a ranch. And if I don't want to do those things, then we'll figure out what you do want to do." Clara May frowned. This wasn't how purchased children were supposed to be treated. "You're not making sense. You bought me. That means I have to do what you say. Those papers in the courthouse say I'm responsible for you until you're grown," Tom said carefully. "They don't say I own you like a piece of property. There's a difference, is there? I believe so, and I hope you'll come to believe it too." Over the following weeks, Clara May tested Tom's patience in every way she could think of. She broke dishes while washing up, claiming it was an accident. She let the chickens out of their coop so they scattered all over the ranch. She forgot to do chores that Maria asked her to do. She was rude to visitors who came to the house. She even tried running away twice, though she never got very far before Tom or one of the ranch hands found her and brought her back. Each time, Clara May expected punishment. A beating, no food, extra work, harsh words. That's what happened to purchased children who caused trouble. But Tom never raised his voice or his hand to her. Instead, spring came to the Double M Ranch like a gentle awakening. The snow melted from the mountains, the stream ran fuller and faster, and wildflowers painted the meadows in bright colors. Clara May had been living at the ranch for almost 6 months now, and she was starting to feel like maybe she belonged there. The biggest change came when she discovered her gift with horses. It started by accident. One morning, Clara May was walking past the corral when she noticed a young mare standing apart from the other horses. The mare was beautiful, black with white markings on her face and legs, but she seemed nervous and skittish. Whenever one of the ranch hands tried to approach her, she would pin her ears back and move away. "That's Midnight," Tom said, coming up beside Clara May. "Wild Mustang we brought in last week. She's not used to people yet. Might take months to gentle her down enough to ride." Clara May watched the mare for a long time. There was something in the horse's eyes that she recognized. Fear mixed with loneliness. The look of a creature that had lost everything familiar and didn't know who to trust. "She's scared," Clara May said softly. "She is indeed. Can't blame her. Being captured and brought to a strange place with strange people would frighten anyone." That afternoon, when her chores were done, Clara May went back to the corral. She didn't try to get close to Midnight. Instead, she sat on the fence and talked to her in a quiet voice. "I know how you feel," she said to the mare. "I was scared when I first came here too. Everything was different and new, and I didn't know if these people were going to be kind or mean." Midnight stood at the far end of the corral, but her ears swiveled toward Clara May's voice. Day after day, Clara May came to sit by the corral and talk to Midnight. She told the mare about her mama and papa, about the auction, about her fears and hopes. Slowly, very slowly, Midnight began to come closer. After a week, the mare would stand near the fence while Clara May talked. After 2 weeks, she would let Clara May touch her nose through the fence rails. By the third week, Clara May was able to slip into the corral and stand beside the mare, running her hands along the smooth black neck. Tom and the ranch hands watched this progress with amazement. "Never seen anything like it," said Jake, the head cowboy. "That girl's got a natural way with horses. Like she can speak their language." Tom nodded, watching Clara May brush Midnight's coat while the mare stood perfectly still. "She understands what it feels like to be afraid and alone. That's worth more than all the horse training in the world." Within a month, Clara May was riding Midnight around the corral. The mare, who had been wild and untouchable, now followed Clara May like a faithful dog. It was as if they had found in each other exactly what they both needed: companionship, understanding, and trust. "How did you do it?" Maria asked one evening as they watched Clara May and Midnight practice jumping over low fences. The men have been working with difficult horses for years, but none of them could reach that mare. Clara May thought about the question seriously. "I didn't try to make her do anything," she said finally. "I just tried to be her friend first. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. Someone who understands and doesn't push too hard." Word of Clara May's gift with horses spread to neighboring ranches. Soon, people were bringing their most difficult horses to the Double M, asking if the young girl could help gentle them. Clara May discovered that she loved this work. Each horse was different with its own personality and fears and needs, but somehow she could always find a way to connect with them. Tom started paying her a small wage for her horsework, which surprised Clara May. "Why are you giving me money?" she asked. "I thought I was supposed to work for free since you bought me." "You're not working for free," Tom said firmly. "You're doing skilled work that helps the ranch make money. That means you earn a share of what you help bring in. Fair's fair." Clara May stared at the coins in her hand. It was the first money she had ever earned in her life. More than that, it was proof that her work had value, that she had skills worth paying for. But not everyone was happy about Clara May's success. One day, while she was in town with Tom and Maria buying supplies, Clara May overheard a conversation between two neighboring ranchers. "Don't see why Mackenzie wastes his time with that orphan girl," one of them said, "giving her a horse to ride around on, paying her wages like she's a real ranch hand. She's just a charity case he picked up at the auction." "Spoiling her, if you ask me," the other replied. "Those auction children are supposed to work for their keep, not play around with fancy horses. He's going to ruin her for honest work." Clara May felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. She had been starting to believe that maybe she really did belong at the Double M Ranch, that maybe her work with horses made her valuable. But these men saw her the way she had always feared people would see her, as nothing more than a purchased child who was being given more than she deserved. That night, Clara May couldn't sleep. She kept hearing those men's words over and over in her head. Charity case, spoiling her. Just an auction child. Finally, she got up and walked to the kitchen for a glass of water. She was surprised to find Tom sitting at the kitchen table reading by lamplight. "Can't sleep either?" he asked kindly. Clara May hesitated, then sat down across from him. "Tom, do you think you're spoiling me?" Tom looked up from his book with surprise. Where did that question come from? Clara May told him about what she had overheard in town. As she talked, she watched Tom's face grow serious and then angry. "Those men," Tom said when she finished, "don't know anything about you or your worth. And frankly, their opinions don't matter to me. But what if they're right? What if I am just a charity case you picked up? What if I'm not really earning my keep?" Tom set down his book and looked at Clara May directly. "Let me tell you what I see when I look at you. I see a young woman who has survived things that would break many adults. I see someone who has a rare gift for understanding and healing frightened creatures. I see someone who works hard, learns fast, and treats everyone around her with kindness and respect. But I was bought at an auction," Clara May said quietly. "I'll always be the girl who was sold for $60. "No," Tom said firmly. "You were a girl who was sold for $60. Now you're Clara May Mackenzie, my daughter, who happens to be the finest horse trainer in 3 counties. There's a difference." Clara May felt tears prick at her eyes. "Mackenzie? But the papers just say you're responsible for me. They don't say I'm really your daughter." "Papers are just papers," Tom said gently. "Family is about more than what's written down in some courthouse. If you want to be a Mackenzie, then you're a Mackenzie. Simple as that. What about Anne? Your real daughter?" Tom was quiet for a moment. "Anne will always be my daughter, and I will always love her. But love isn't something you can use up. There's room in my heart for both my girls, the one I lost and the one I found." That conversation changed something fundamental in Clara May. She began to hold her head higher when she went to town. She started introducing herself as Clara May Mackenzie instead of just Clara May. And when people made snide comments about her being an auction child, she looked them straight in the eye and said, "Yes, I was. And now I'm Tom Mackenzie's daughter and the best horse trainer you'll find anywhere." Her confidence grew along with her skills. By the end of the summer, Clara May was not only training horses but also teaching other young people how to work with difficult animals. Tom converted one of the smaller barns into a proper training facility, and people came from hundreds of miles away to learn from the young woman who could gentle the wildest Mustang. One day, a family arrived at the ranch with their teenage son and a horse that no one could ride. The horse was a beautiful stallion named Thunder, but he had been mistreated by his previous owner and now trusted no one. "We're at our wits' end," the boy's father said to Tom. "We bought Thunder for our son Danny's birthday, but the horse won't let anyone near him. We've tried 3 different trainers and they all say he's hopeless. Someone in town said your daughter might be able to help." Clara May studied Thunder from a safe distance. The stallion was magnificent but clearly traumatized. He paced restlessly in the corral, his eyes wild with fear and anger. "He's been hurt badly," Clara May told Danny, who looked about her age. "It's going to take time and patience to help him heal. Are you willing to do the work?" "I'll do anything," Danny said eagerly. "I just want to be able to ride him. Before you can ride him, you have to earn his trust. And before you can earn his trust, you have to understand what he's been through." Clara May spent the next several days working with both Danny and Thunder. She taught the boy how to move slowly and calmly around the horse, how to read the stallion's body language, how to communicate without force or intimidation. "It's like you're speaking his language," Danny said in amazement as Clara May approached Thunder with a halter. "In a way I am," Clara May replied. "When you've been hurt and scared, you learn to recognize those feelings in others. Thunder and I understand each other." By the end of the week, Thunder was allowing both Clara May and Danny to handle him. By the end of the month, Danny was riding the stallion around the corral. The transformation was remarkable. Thunder went from a dangerous, unpredictable animal to a loyal and gentle mount. 5 years had passed since that frightening day at the courthouse auction, and Clara May Mackenzie barely recognized the scared little girl she used to be. Now 12 years old, she stood tall and confident as she watched the sunrise paint the mountains gold from the porch of the Double M Ranch. Her horse training school was thriving. Students came from across the territory to learn from her, and she had helped more than 30 young people discover their own worth and talents. But today would test everything she had learned about strength, courage, and the meaning of family. Tom came out onto the porch carrying 2 cups of coffee, his face serious. "Morning, daughter. We need to talk." Clara May accepted the warm cup gratefully. Even in summer, the mountain mornings could be chilly. "What's wrong?" "You look worried." "Got word yesterday that the railroad company wants to buy our land. They're planning to run a new line through this valley, and they say our ranch sits right in the path." Clara May felt her stomach drop. The Double M Ranch wasn't just her home. It was her sanctuary, her school, her entire world. They can't just take our land, can they? They can if they get the government to declare it's for the public good. It's called eminent domain. They pay you what they think the land is worth and force you to sell whether you want to or not. How much are they offering? Tom's jaw tightened. Half of what this place is actually worth. They know most ranchers can't afford to fight them in court, so they make low offers and count on people being too scared or too poor to resist. Clara May set down her coffee cup, her mind already working. Over the past 5 years, she had learned a lot more than just horse training. Tom had made sure she got a proper education, including lessons in reading, writing, arithmetic, and even some law and business. He said a person needed to understand how the world worked if they wanted to succeed in it. "What do we know about property rights in this territory?" she asked. Tom smiled despite his worry. "That's my girl. Always thinking like a fighter. Well, I've been doing some research. The territorial law says they have to prove the railroad is truly necessary, and that our land is the only possible route. They also have to pay fair market value, not whatever they feel like offering. So we fight them? We fight them. But it won't be easy. Railroad companies have powerful lawyers and lots of money. They're used to getting what they want." Clara May thought about all the young people who came to her school, many of them orphans and outcasts like she had been. She thought about the horses in her training corrals, gentle now but still carrying scars from past mistreatment. She thought about the life Tom had built for her here, the safety and love she had found in this valley. "Then we'll have to be smarter than they are," she said firmly. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Tom and Clara May traveled to the territorial capital to research land laws and property rights. They discovered that the railroad company had taken several shortcuts in their legal filings, rushing through paperwork without following proper procedures. More importantly, they learned that the proposed railroad route wasn't actually necessary. The company could easily run their tracks through the next valley over, but that route would cost them more money because they'd have to build an extra bridge. "They're trying to save money by stealing our land," Clara May said angrily as she read through the legal documents. "That's not public good. That's private greed." But even with this knowledge, they faced a daunting challenge. The railroad company had hired the best lawyers in the territory, while Tom and Clara May would have to represent themselves in court. That's when Clara May had an idea that surprised everyone, including herself. "What if we don't just fight for our ranch?" she said to Tom one evening as they planned their legal strategy. "What if we fight for everyone?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're not the only ones facing this problem. I bet there are other ranchers and homesteaders being pressured to sell their land too. What if we organize all of them to fight together? The railroad company might be able to beat one ranch family in court, but could they beat 50 families all standing together?" Tom stared at her with amazement. "Clara May, that's brilliant. But it would mean traveling all over the territory, talking to people, convincing them to join our cause. That's a lot of work and responsibility." "Good thing I learned how to work with difficult, scared creatures," Clara May said with a smile. "Turns out people aren't that different from horses sometimes. They just need someone to show them they don't have to face their fears alone." Over the next month, Clara May and Tom traveled throughout the territory, visiting ranches and farms and small towns. They discovered that the railroad company was indeed pressuring dozens of families to sell their land for below-market prices. Some had already given in, afraid to fight such a powerful company. Others were angry but felt helpless. Clara May spoke at community meetings, sharing her story and explaining what they had learned about the law. 5 years ago, I was sold at an auction like a piece of property, she would tell the crowds. I felt powerless and worthless. But I learned something important. You're only powerless if you believe you're powerless. When people stand together and know their rights, they can face down anyone, even a railroad company. Her youth and passion were compelling. People who might have ignored a speech from an adult lawyer listened carefully to this young woman who spoke from experience about fighting seemingly impossible odds. One by one, families joined their cause. The movement grew from the Double M Ranch to encompass most of the southern part of the territory. They called themselves the Land Rights Alliance, and Clara May became their unofficial spokesperson despite being only 12 years old. The railroad company was not pleased. They sent representatives to try to intimidate the alliance members. offering slightly higher payments to some families while threatening legal action against others. But their biggest mistake was underestimating Clara May herself. One day, 3 men in expensive suits arrived at the Double M Ranch. They claimed to be from the railroad company's legal department, but something about them seemed more threatening than professional. "We hear you're the one stirring up trouble," the leader said to Clara May. He was a large man with cold eyes and an unpleasant smile. "Little girl playing with grown-up business she doesn't understand." "I understand it just fine," Clara May replied calmly, though her heart was beating fast. Tom was in town getting supplies and Maria was visiting her sister. Clara May was alone with these men. "Do you? Because we have ways of making troublesome people disappear. Wouldn't want a young lady like yourself to have an accident, would we?" Clara May felt fear creep up her spine, but she also felt something else: anger. These men were trying to use fear and intimidation, just like the cruel ranchers who used to beat their horses into submission. She had learned how to deal with bullies, whether they had 4 legs or 2. "Are you threatening me?" she asked, her voice steady despite her fear. "Just giving friendly advice. Drop this foolish lawsuit, convince your friends to take the railroad's generous offer, and everyone stays safe and happy." That's when Clara May heard the sound of hoofbeats. Not Tom returning early, but something even better. A group of her former students, young men and women she had trained in horse handling, were riding up to the ranch house. They had come for their monthly gathering to discuss training, techniques, and share experiences. The 3 men in suits suddenly looked less confident as a dozen skilled riders dismounted and walked toward the house. These weren't just random young people. They were all strong, capable individuals who had learned not just horse training from Clara May, but also confidence and loyalty. "Is everything all right, Clara May?" asked Danny, the boy who had worked with Thunder years before. He was 18 now and worked as a horse trainer for the territorial government. "These gentlemen were just leaving," Clara May said pleasantly. "They were giving me some advice about being careful." The railroad men looked around at the circle of young faces, all watching them with suspicious eyes. Suddenly intimidating one young girl seemed like a much more complicated proposition. "We'll be in touch," the leader said, backing toward their horses. "I'm sure you will," Clara May replied. "And next time, you might want to bring a lawyer instead of whatever you brought today. We prefer to do business legally." After the men left, Clara May's students gathered around her with concern and excitement. "Who were those men?" asked Jenny, the former orphan who had become successful in her own right. Clara May explained about the railroad company and their attempts at intimidation. As she talked, she saw the anger and determination growing in her students' faces. "This isn't right," said Peter, another former student. "They can't just threaten people and steal their land. What can we do to help?" asked Danny. Clara May looked around at these young people who had come to her as students and become like family. An idea began forming in her mind. "Actually, there might be something you can do. The court hearing is next month. What if you all came to testify about what this place means to you? About how the work we do here helps young people from all over the territory?" "Of course we'll be there," Jenny said immediately. "This ranch saved my life. It saved all our lives in one way or another." The others nodded in agreement.